Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. I thought I'd show you a book before when I say a book, I thought this is interesting by the artwork here. This is a book I bought a few years ago, actually 2021. This is a book called Psychology of the Observer. And this is a picture of what someone is supposed to be doing in their life, so to speak. In other words, they're trying to find out their true self. And this particular book with this artwork was a sculptural. This is a sculptural piece that's actually found in South Carolina. I think it's near Georgetown, South Carolina, in a sculptural park. There's actually sculptures work in this whole park off the coast of South Carolina on the island. Now, he talks about what they call the observe and observer here, which is part of Zen philosophy, so to speak. Now, I'm not giving any coherence or giving support to that. That's just something that I wanted to show that what we are supposed to be doing is working on ourselves the whole time we're here, developing, finding out why we're here and our purpose, so to speak. So we're going to continue the chapter. This time it's going to be chapter 25 of this particular book by a gentleman who was moved to England. This is called not idea, but Id-Nefesh, Nefesh. Again, as I read here, I'm learning as well as you are, because this is something new. Hopefully, sometime in the near future, me and Phil get a chance to talk about this. But there's a lot going on here. It's a lot, more than I know, okay, because I don't know a lot. I'm just pursuing this. So we begin chapter 25 again with Sigmund Freud. Was born in 1856 and died in 1939. Most of his life was spent as a working psychologist in Vienna, where he introduced some fundamental contributions to the study of Western psychology. Many of his original ideas have been modified, and several schools based upon his views have emerged to form the middle ground between the body and the reflex oriented psychologists and the Jungian, that is the Jungians, that is those who follow Carl Jung, who, quote, follow their founder, explore the middle and upper zones of the psyche. Freud's main discovery was the recognition of two levels of psychological activity, the conscious and the unconscious. The latter, he maintained, had a far greater influence upon people's lives than they realized. Most people, he observed, were manipulated by powerful instincts, drives that were held in check by their education or social customs. So this makes sense. The ego or conscious mind acted as the facilitator between the ID impulses and the constraints of the superego idea, which punished or rewarded one's performance according to his often quite unconsciously acquired opinion. This tripartite system forms the basic model of Freudian psychology and can be seen from the Kabbalistic standpoint to relate to the body and the lower part of the psychological tree. The focus on consciousness resides in the dot-Usad ego, while that which is unconscious lies beyond the liminal line between Had and Nasad. So let's get this book out again here and find it real quick. A good piece here. Here's a piece here. Let me show it to you. That's what they're talking about, a tree. You know, there's also, we know in Genesis there's a tree of good and evil and the tree of life. And the whole goal in life is to get off the tree of good and evil, because which what that means there's a division within yourself, and to get on the tree of life, which is singularity. Okay. So like the embryo body, the psyche builds slowly up from a primitive general scheme that over time becomes more refined as the process of inner growth and experiences fill out and integrate. However, before the psychological organism can begin to function, it has to have a massive input of energy and sensor impressions. This is provided by the vehicle of the body that has been grafted onto the lower psyche at birth. From that moment on, a flood of impulses rises up from the physical tree and passes into the psyche, which is initially swamped by the experience. One reason why infant has to sleep so much is in order to allow the yet unprotected psyche to adjust to the impact of the Nefesh, or vital soul, called the ID by Freud. The ID, which draws its energy, not idea, but I keep saying that. Sorry about that. ID, which draws its energy from the mineral, vegetable, and animal levels in the body. So let's go back with, I'm trying to think his name now. It's at Stanford. We are not a mineral. That's the lowest. We're not a vegetable. That's the next highest. We're not an animal. That is the third highest. And the fourth highest is to being a human being. Okay, so, minerals important for our well-being. That is for our physical body. So are vegetables. But we also know that animals don't have a consciousness, but there are what I would call have traits that basically they're what I call they know when to fly and not to. They're given what I call certain things, certain tools in their particular body to know what to do, what not to do. Sorry, I don't remember what it's called. I have so many things sometimes in my mind that I tend to get too ahead of myself. Anyway, it seeks reliefs. That is, following basic law of primitive life, it seeks relief from any tension it might experience, such as hunger, yes, or excessive light. That is, it will attempt to find whatever is pleasurable and avoid what is painful. This is an instinctive reflex that's based upon, it goes back to the animal part, instinct. Animal is related to instinct, okay? But they're also, the young child, their instincts also. That drives all its activities, such as the withdrawal of the finger from something that is too hot, or the seeking of the mother's nipple for substance. Such reflexes operate at every level of the body, and the newly incarnated psyche initiates has no control over them because the connections between the physical and psychological organism are, in the infant, quite tenuous and unrelated. Because of this, there is no restraining factor, and the immediate needs of the ID are sought with a degree of ferocity that one would associate with the Nefesh. That is, a sensitivity of the animal, vegetables, and mineral levels of body consciousness. An example of this in nature is of wolves who have eaten nothing for days and who will attack anything. Another instance is of elephants who will trek hundreds of miles for a lick of rock salt. Because they're minerals. The ID has the same powerful drive because it knows that if its needs are not met, it will die. Same thing with the elephant. It has to have this particular thing. Rock salt. And I'm sure that would be similar to cows, so to speak, too. When I'm thinking about rock salt, I'm talking about the thing that is probably about this big, square-like. It was given out and put in the field, usually with the cows, and then they would lick it to get its minerals, such and such. The reason why they do that is because basically the food that they're getting doesn't have enough nourishment in it. That's what's going on. That's another story. We won't get into that, but that's just what's happening, why it seeks after that. Okay, so because the infinite needs are not always met instantly, it may not be conventional for the mother to meet them. There arises, Freud observes, the phenomenon of frustration. Normally, the sense organs and motor functions respond instantly to such situations, like something in the eye. But there are times when even they cannot solve a problem. A child may want to be picked up, but nobody is there, or it might wish to touch an object out of reach. This generates a tension that cannot be released. And without the governing experience of a developed ego, the intensity of the charge is reinforced by all the energy available being forced on that incident, resulting in a passionate response that cannot find satisfaction. Added to this, to the frustration of a psyche which is still adult in its outlook, but which can do nothing with so primitive a body. Here begins what is called the primary process that begins to connect the body and psyche through the da, and yasat of the ego. Over the first month of life, the infant slowly builds up a series of images through the senses and the perception of the yasata ego of, quote, say, the mother's breast that gives substance. With the constant repetition of feeding, memory begins to develop so that the baby can recall the object that gives it satisfaction. As the ego is not sufficiently evolved to differential time or space, it cannot tell the difference between the image and the reality of its source of nourishment, and this can cause further frustration and distress until the child realizes that there will be times when it is and is not fed. Here we see the beginning of a process in which the psyche starts to relay to the body as sense impressions, and reflexes are recognized and synthesized through memory into imagination. Imagination, in turn, is used by the infant to help reduce the physical tension as it conjures up the object in an attempt to satisfy its need. This gives the infant the illusion of reality because the Id-Nefesh cannot tell the difference between an objective perception and a subjective memory. In Kabbalah, this is the difference between the da, or knowledge of the body, which only relates to sense data, and yasat, which is concerned with images. Many people will recognize the phenomenon when they see a distant bus and the number they want quite clearly until the bus comes close and the number is not what they imagine. Babies have the same problem, but do not know it until they develop the secondary process of identification reality. That is, realizing that the imaginary breast, for example, is not really there, and a nearby object that is desired does not come closer unless the infant extends its hand or cries out for it. Until the first and secondary processes starts to become operational, the idea energy has no form to fill by which to be channeled. Because the psyche belongs to the Dasara world of formation, these processes have to be built up in order to make conscious links between body and psyche. However, until a well-organized system is established, the ID will go wherever it wants. As such, it will infuse the psyche with two powerful nefesh urges that remain always in the individual, no matter how educated or sophisticated they may become. The positive aspect is called libido and is related to the merciful right side of the tree as an active creative process. The negative aspect of the ID is called mortido, and this is identified with the left pillar of severity. So you see, one is merciful, one is severe. These two poles of life and death are necessary because in nature, the power to kill in order to defend or eat is as vital as the power to propagate and create. In a human being, these two faces of the Id-Nefesh are usually contained and controlled by the ego, and later by the superego. But their presence is always there in what some psychologists call the subconscious, or that which is below consciousness, the unconscious, according to the same view, being above the ego. Here's the distinction between the tree of the body and the tree of the psyche as they meet and operate below and above the da-yasa of the ego. Figure 29 is a battle. Conflict is a part of life. Without it, one would never know just how developed one is. All the legends about evolution speak of the endless fight between the inferior and the superior parts of our being. Here, the lion is the symbol of the animal soul with its not erroneous, but enormous appetites and desires, eating the sun, the sign of the self. It requires constant efforts to control and tame passions, not only in youth, but also in old age. Merlin fell in love with his beautiful student. The result was his imprisonment, that is, a state of fixation that can halt development. This was a alchemy woodcut of the 17th century. The power of the subconscious levels wells up in all of us, and in some people, that is, where the ego is not sufficiently strong, the conflicts of neurosis can set in as a powerful instinctive drives opposes the standards set by the superego. In occasional cases where Yasat is not well founded, the ego is overthrown and psychosis will occur at the Id-Nefesh, bursting out in a psychotic episode such as stealing or suicide if the mortido turns back upon the person. This is seen in the larger scale in time of war when nations suffer a mass psychosis, and even in peacetime when, for example, white Australians went out on weekend hunts for black Aborigines who they raped or castrated before killing. Here, both the libido and mortido were used savagely by so-called, quote, civilized human beings in a way no animal would. The function of the ego is to check this primitive urges and convert, not pervert their raw vitality into higher order of activity. The factor of free will is quite crucial in such matters, if you remember that the infant has an adult psyche that is not as yet unconscious. The idea of nefesh is wild and untamed in the infant's body. As such, its energy flows freely into the lower face of the psychological tree until it is bridled. The clinical term used as the ego begins to contain the ID is binding. This means the setting up of patterns of thinking, feeling, and acting. That is the triads that overlay the upper face of the body tree are brought to bear on the Yasat that will generate the ego. This process, Freud noted, was helped by the ancient memories of previous generations in which the experience of mankind was passed on, perhaps by genes, or perhaps held in the upper parts of the brain. These archaic forms were, however, still quite primitive, inasmuch as they were preoccupied with seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. They were also quite irrational and perceived the world like the infant as centered upon itself. Freud also observed that capacity to make images of wishful fulfillment were very similar to the basis of primitive magic, which relate to an infant's belief in its own power to get what it desired by moving its limbs or calling in a certain way. This is a very Freudian view of existence. The sense of omniscience that a child experiences may well be its perception of physical reality, but not all of dreams and fantasies are about food and comfort. Many people recall the prenatal stage in the upper worlds, and they retreated there during their sleep periods while their infant bodies remained in the cot. Returning to the idea of nefesh, what can be said is that it is the physical basis of the psyche activity. That is, it anchors the overlay of education, custom, and even spiritual development. As such, it plays an important part in life as a source of power that can elate or deplete the psyche according to how it is handled. As a largely hidden factor, the ID infiltrates the psyche to aid or oppose conscious and unconsciousness events, such as so-called accidents that prevent or initiate certain actions. It's often symbolized as the notoria animal in many dreams or day fantasies that carry the person on through dark or hard times. The idea nefesh is the power pack of the physical tree. When the skills and intelligence of the psyche can convert its vital energy, then much can be achieved. But this capacity is as yet a long way off in the infinite, who first has to learn how to relate its psyche to the new body. And we're going to stop there with chapter 25. Appreciate you being here. Hope this will stimulate you to pursue some deeper things about who you are and why you're here. And I appreciate you taking your time to listen to what I share. So I wish you a good night, and done a few videos a day. Didn't do any yesterday. I had to work. I was pretty tired. So I wish you guys a beautiful evening, and you take care. Have a good night. Take care.